Hi there. I'm already giggling. Hi, welcome to Storytime. I am Dr. Jennifer Bird. I am a biblical scholar, and I care very much about what people do with what they find in the Bible. That's kind of my thing. And I'm here today. Does anybody else get all dancing around with that intro music? That's why I play it, so I can kind of get into things, feel good, feel like doing some things together here. So first of all, welcome. Thank you so much for those who are joining us live and in the chat or just watching and who are able to, want to. And if you're watching this later, thank you for that as well. If you have not already subscribed to my channel and you like the stuff that I do, I'd love it if you would subscribe. That lets people know, other people similar to you, similarly minded, find it. Same goes for liking videos or making comments. It all helps to kind of get it into the algorithm. So I appreciate any of the ways that you support the work I'm doing. So thank you for all of that. And happy Juneteenth. This is June 19th, 2025 is the day that this is recording, going live and recording. And I would be remiss if I did not do a thing about this just very briefly. I think it's, you don't have to be like, it doesn't necessarily pertain to me being a biblical scholar. It pertains to me being a human being who cares about things and raising awareness in all kinds of ways. I also do see the connection to between biblical texts and using those as authorities in various people's lives that perpetuated or justified the enslavement of millions of people. So there is that. But I wanted to share very briefly. Let me just go to it. I'm going to bring it up here. I was looking for, what am I doing? I was looking for a good video on Juneteenth. So I'll share the link here in StreamYard as well. I'm not going to play it, although it's only 5 minutes. 5.5 minutes is a great video on Juneteenth, and it's a bit of an animation. I'll play a little bit of it for you here.
One day, while hiding in the kitchen, Charlotte Brooks overheard a life-changing secret. At the age of 17, she'd been separated from her family and taken to William Nealon's Texas plantation. There, she was made to do housework at the violent whims of her enslavers. On that fateful day, she learned that slavery had recently been abolished, but Nealon conspired to keep this a secret from those he enslaved. Hearing this, Brooks stepped out of her hiding spot, proclaimed her freedom, spread the news throughout the plantation, and ran. That night, she returned for her daughter, Tempe, and before Nealon's spiteful bullets could find them, they were gone for good.
It's a really good video, by the way, covering a really intense history rather quickly. So I highly recommend it. If you need a little bit of a refresher on enslavement in this country and the different laws and ways that various secessions tried to take place, etc., leading up to the Civil War. And anyway, I wanted to offer that as a way to acknowledge what we're trying to acknowledge today in the country I live in. Also, I heard an interview this morning, a very brief interview on NPR of Isabelle Wilkerson, and I think it's really appropriate that she frames it around finances, right? The idea of caste and various elements of humanity. Caste is usually connected to financial. The levels of finance, levels of money, levels of income and assets and possessions that people have. So I love the comment she made. 12 generations of people, at least 12 generations of people were enslaved. And that means that's 12 generations of families that did not get the money that they worked for. Like the work that they didn't get paid for. Simple little tidbit to kind of frame reframe or rethink what the effects of slavery and it establishing this country and establishing all these wealthy people in the South, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, it is to me, it's a systemic issue, and it's about it's about the way this country was started and got a leg up in the global sphere. Lots of things to think about today. So I am celebrating and appreciative for all the things that people are trying to raise awareness around today, especially since the president of this country is backing off on DEI, and it's just so many things. I get I'm not going to spin out on that right now. Okay, so my nod to today. It's a little wimpy, but there we go. So thank you for being here. Today, I wanted to talk about some things. So I've got some things here to look at. And I just realized I was getting confused as I'm prepping. I'm still prepping these videos on Paul and significant elements of Paul's letters that I wish people were more familiar with or more aware of. And then I realized, I'm not talking about Paul today. We're talking about Genesis. So I can close those down, although I did just make an article available on my website that's just really great in terms of showing the overlap between the ideas that end up being pretty important in Christianity, right? Thank you, Paul. And how those overlap with ideas related to the Isis cult, the mystery cult, or the cult of worshiping, the ancient goddess Isis. It's really fascinating. It's amazing how much content, how much overlap there is there. And I think how it helps you I think it helps you reframe the way you look at Paul's letters, a decent chunk of them, which is interesting in and of itself, I think, anytime we can do that. So anyway, so I'm working on that on the side. Today, we're going to do some story time, and it is coming from Genesis, starting in chapter 13. So let's just get over to that, right? I'm just going to throw this. I'm not watching all the slavery was worldwide, not just on a plantation. I'm going to put this up here too. Yes, for sure. And it continues to be. I'm not trying to, thank you. And it continues to take various forms, right? It was an extreme example did take place on this continent, pulling from other continents to populate here. And it's messy, right? It's messy in terms of the states that did and didn't support it, and that did, supported letting go and like getting away with it. It's messy. This country is messy. Every country's messy, right? We're not unique. It's just that I don't want to ignore that that's a part of things. Also, worth noting that women of color suffer the most wherever in the world they live. Yes, that is true. So if you're looking at the binary, which I don't think that you do, but yeah, that is true. And my thought immediately, because I'm thinking about trans people a lot lately, also trans women of color and suffer more than other trans folks, but right. It's so people. I care about people, right? Trying to understand other people's realities, respecting and giving space for people to be who they are and their authentic selves. That's kind of what I try to do. So let's get into Genesis. And we're gonna read some interesting stuff here. So to be honest, it's been a while since I've read through chapters 13 and 14 or even 15, because I usually just focus in on chapter 12, which is, where Abram, which I read last week, where Abram pimps out, his woman, and then comes away really rich, really wealthy. And then in chapter 16, where we have this issue of Hagar and Ishmael, and chapter 21, where he almost sacrifices his own child, I usually focus on those. And so I thought it would be helpful. I was going to skip over these chapters because of that. And I thought, no, let's not do that. Let's keep going. And you might be surprised some of the elements that will stick out to you today. And I'm going to just go ahead and read here and pause as I need to. This title, this subheading is Abram and Lot separate. Separate is not in the Hebrew. That is the translation committee came up with that. So Abram went up from Egypt. So remember, last week we were looking at chapter 12, and that's where they go down to Egypt. Abram pimps out Sarai, and because of it, he leaves a wealthy man, right? And he also gets his woman back. So they loot the Pharaoh, right? Anyway, and how that is often misread cracks me up too. People will do everything they can to make it sound like Sarai did not have to be, was not the Pharaoh. She wasn't forced to have a sexual encounter with the Pharaoh. Like, it's just silly. It's just silly to think that way. But I understand why people of faith do that, because they don't want anything negative and bad happening. But I think I think just the opposite is what we should be talking about. The first chapter, the beginning of the story for all three monotheistic traditions is like founded on the rape of a woman. What? God. I've never said those words together before. So here we go. So that's this. So Abram went up from Egypt, he and his woman. This is not wife in the Hebrew, it is woman. So he and his woman and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the Negev. I'm going to take a minute here to recover from what I just said. Now, Abram was very rich in livestock and silver and in gold because the Pharaoh just gave it to him, right? He literally pimps out his woman to get rich. And now we're ignoring that that's where all this came from, right? Chapter 12 tells us that Pharaoh gives him all this stuff. But we're just ignoring that part. We're just celebrating that he's rich. Okay. He journeyed on by stages, and notice that Sarai is not mentioned in this chapter, okay? She was bartered, traded back and forth for goods in the previous chapter. So thank you. You've done your job for now. Thanks. Okay. Now back to the men. He journeyed on by stages from the Negev as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, on the previous, before they went into Egypt, between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had made an altar at the first. So we're circling back. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. Now Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, and the land could not support both of them living together because their possessions were so great that they could not live together. That's an interesting handling of that verse. Anyway, thus strife arose between the herders of Abram's livestock and the herders of Lot's livestock. At that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites lived in the land. We've been told multiple times already, well, maybe it's just 2 so far, that there are people already living in the land. So there should be no confusion here, right? This is a story about justifying claiming some land, even though someone else is already living there. Okay. But also, I want to highlight this. The herders of Abram's livestock and they have a lot of people. There are people enslaved to them, or that they own, or who've been taken into their entourage, right? That's a lot of people if you're not the one herding your own livestock. Then Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herders and my herders, for we are kindred. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, then I will go to the right, or if you take the right hand, then I will go left." Lot looked about and saw that the plain of the Jordan was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, in the direction of Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself all the plain of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed eastward. and they separated from each other. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, or Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the plain and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now, the people of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. So I'll highlight for you this that what is it that made them sinners, right? At this point, we don't know. And excuse me, goodness. I should say at no point are their actions ever described. So we can assume on certain level that they are worshiping other gods. That's a given throughout the Hebrew Bible. People who worship other gods are considered sinners. They're considered they might not be called wicked, but they are certainly antagonistic to the Lord, right? So within lots of narratives we get this. But in general, they are probably like every other community of people you've ever met. But we know that there's a story coming where in relation to this story, to this city. And anyway, I just I find it really interesting how many times someone wants to justify or explain something, based on, well, it said in 13 that they're sinners. I'm like, yeah, well, who we don't like the narrative tells us in a few chapters that a city is destroyed. There's no way to justify that. Like there's nothing you can tell me, right, that will make that okay. You know, it's small asteroid hitting the earth. Said that's fine, right? But this doesn't do it for me. Saying that they're wicked, great sinners against the Lord, that just tells me that they worship other gods. That's it. That's all that tells me. Okay. The Lord said to Abram after Lot had separated from him, "Raise your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land that you see, I will give to you and to your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also can be counted. Rise up, walk through the length and the breadth of the land, for I will give it to you." So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron. And there he built an altar to the Lord. Now, I want you to pay attention to what's described here. We don't get it until, I guess, the end of this chapter, where I thought it was in that chapter that we had. Okay, so maybe it's next chapter. Okay, so I'm going to read a whole bunch of names, and I did go look at the Hebrew ahead of time, and I'm going to do my best because I noticed that some of the English renderings didn't match up what I was taught in terms of how to pronounce Hebrew. So I'm just going to do my best, and I hope that if any of you are particularly well trained in biblical Hebrew, that you will just give me a little grace here. So. But let's do a quick recounting of why we have a narrative. This is at the very foundation of this movement or this group of people, right? Last week we read in chapters in 11 and 12, we read about Abram and his father and grandfather, like their people leaving Ur and moving westward. Grandfather, not a part of the thing. His father dies in Haran and he moves on and then has to keep moving down to Egypt because of a famine. But we have at the core of this thing a promise about a certain swath of land. And I'd like you to consider, if you haven't done this before, that all of these promises for a certain piece of land are only necessary for a group of people who haven't established themselves on a piece of land. So we have this history, this narrative, these several generations of people that are being narrated Their lives are being told in the book of Genesis. And these stories are what you would tell people who are without their own land. So you have a promise from the deity that you get this piece of land. That right, and so if you are struggling to survive, you're struggling to establish yourself as a people, as I think the Tower of Babel is an interesting story to kind of relate that issue. If you're struggling to establish yourself, if you're struggling to survive with all these different groups of people storming through this part of the world, desiring for someone to come in and say, "This can be yours," makes sense to me. And only, it seems to me, in an ancient way of seeing the world, do you just ignore the fact that other people are already living there. Like, right? I mean, it's a fantasy. It's a fantasy to say that some divine being is gonna say, "No, this is yours," even though it's already populated by other people. On the flip side, what this acknowledgement of other people already living there does is it gives a nod to the most likely theory in terms of where the Israelite people came from. They came from pulling themselves away from some of their neighbors, right? So the people already living in this territory, there are groups of people all around them, and this group of people kind of came together around the worship of Yahweh. So in a strange way, this idea of people already living there, that is real. Like, that's historically reliable, right? And but the narrative of fleeing from Egypt and all that stuff, that's just fantasy, right? Um, that a group of people eventually pulled away or kind of established themselves in contrast to their neighbors, that's documented in like somewhat documented in these various narratives in the Hebrew Bible, right? Their struggle to stop doing the things they used to do because the people around them are still doing it. Like it's just over and over. We do get a glimpse of what is historically reliable, right? People were living in the land, and some segment of them wanted to separate themselves, right? And they make claims on the land that they are already sharing with other people. Okay, so here we go. In the days of King Amraphel of Shinar, King Arioch of Elasar, King Chedar it's not a che in the Hebrew. Kedor Laomer of Elam and King Tidal of Goyim. These kings made war with King Bera of Sodom, King Birsha of Gomorrah, King Shinav of Admah, King Shemeber of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. So the first group made war against Sodom, Gomorrah, and the others. All these joined forces in the valley of Siddim, that is the Dead Sea. 12 years they had served Chedar Laomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled. So I'm just backing up here. So in the days of King Amraphel of Shinar, this king, and this king made war against Sodom. Okay. 12 years they had served one of the kings. In the 13th, they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedar Laomer and the kings who were with him, that's just an interesting name, even in the Hebrew, Chedar Laomer, and the kings who were with him came and subdued the Rephaim in Ashtaroth, Karnaim, the Zuzim in Ham, the Emim in Shaveh Kiriathaim, and the Horites in the hill country of Seir, as far as El Paran on the edge of the wilderness. Then they turned back and came to On Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and subdued all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites who lived in Hazazon Tamar. I'm not tracking with all of that. Like, I don't even have a map in my head, an image in my head of what I just read. I'm just gonna be honest with you, but I hope you're tracking with enough of what's happening to get some of the basics. Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, went out, and they joined battle in the valley of Siddim with, right? So this thing happened, right, with Chedar Omer of Elam, King Tada of Goyim, King Amraphel of Shinar, and King Arioch of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. Now, the valley of Siddim was full of bitumen pits. And as the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some fell into them, and the rest fled to the hill country. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the 5 were fleeing from the presence of the 4, right? So the enemy took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, the son of Abram's brother, who lived in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah have just been sacked, although on the battlefield, not the cities themselves, but what they had with them. Interesting. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram, the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and of Aner. These were allies of Abram. When Abram heard that his nephew had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men born in his house, 318 of them. Can we just talk about how large of a people he already is, according to the story? And went in pursuit as far as Dan. He divided his forces against them by night, he and his servants, and routed them and pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus. Then he brought back all the goods and also brought back his nephew Lot with his goods and the women and the people. Okay, so Sodom and Gomorrah have just been sacked to some extent. Abram leads a force to go get all that stuff back, and they do, apparently, according to this story, according to this little fantasy. After his return from the defeat of Chedar Omer and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, that is, the king's valley. And King Melchizedek of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High. He blessed him and said, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, maker of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." So Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. Then the king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself." But Abram said to the king of Sodom, "I have sworn to God Most High, maker of heaven and earth." Wait, what's the footnote on that one? Oh, we bring in Elohim. It's interesting. "That I would not take a thread or a sandal strap or anything that is yours, so that you might not say, 'I made Abram rich.' I will take nothing but what the young men have eaten and the share of the men who went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. Let them take their share." So Abram is just salvaged, whatever, Sodom. The king tries to pay him grateful for this deliverance. And Abram says, "No, that's okay. I got it. We're good." So before we move on to that, let me go back to that. I just want to sit with that for a second because this is not something I hear people talk about, right? Abram goes to battle to save the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, and does so, returns all their goods. I think I'm pausing on this because I think it makes, even within the confines of the narrative, which I try to be very careful about, right? Let the narrative be what the narrative is versus what is historically reliable or what we can talk about in terms of this story. Sodom in chapter 19 is just such a disturbing, it's such an unpleasant story because of how it's been misunderstood. Unpleasant to me because of that. But I do find this really interesting because what doesn't this say something good about the people of Sodom? At least of the king, that he's grateful, that right? I mean, I don't know. It's just an odd piece of the story to not have people talk about. Okay? Um, okay, so let's keep going. I should come back over here and see what's going on in the chat. I like how him getting all that is just oh, you're such a fun comment. You guys are so fun. I'm gonna pull this up so I can yeah, and then come look at your comments here. Oh, look who's back. Look who's here today. Hi there. Okay. Okay. Aw, thank you for that. Okay, I am, I do just oh, thank you, Pragmatic Crystal, for being here and for doing all that. I appreciate that. Abram beats Scary Kings. I mean, did people know that? And also, did people realize that the king of Sodom is actually grateful and tries to, like, pay not pay him off, but, like, this isn't talked about. Okay. So this is a weird chapter, and to me, I remember distinctly doing various Bible studies when I was in my 20s, early to mid-20s, and really just needing to figure this story out, what's described here in chapter 15, and it is a bit odd to me, and it still is. It was then, and it still is. But I also just wanna comment, the women have fallen to the side. We don't we don't have any women involved in the narrative. They're obviously there, uh, but they aren't important to the narrative, which isn't true, right? They are essential for making things happen and work and feeding and taking care and all the different things, but we're not seeing that part of the story. And here we go with some more things about men, right? Some more exchanges between men. Um, and what is meant to be a reassurance is what's happening in this chapter. So after these things, after Abram goes to battle for people that he's trying to appease, like, it's just really interesting. He goes to battle for people, well, for his nephew, but also other people along with that, right? And he just he's great. He's a hero, right? Abram is a hero, even though he doesn't really get women, um, or treat them well, uh, but he does great things in battle. Okay, so after all those things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. "Do not be afraid, Abram, for I am your shield." It just makes me sick to my stomach how many times God is described using warlike metaphors or metaphors that evoke violence. You only need a shield if you're going to battle. If you're expecting to have something thrown at you, shot at you, something, you need protection. So I'm your shield. God is being described, depicted, presented as that, and it just every time, it just makes ugh. "I'm your shield, your reward shall be very great." But Abram said, "Oh, Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eleazar of Damascus." Abram said, "You have given me no offspring," right? Blaming God for not having offspring. Um, "So a slave born in my house is to be my heir." It's a really whiny thing to say. It cracks me up, actually. But the word of the Lord came to him. "This man shall not be your heir. No, no one but your very own issue." I just, in thinking of that in this light, it just, no one but the one you ejaculate, um, and have incubate in a woman. "No one but your very own issue shall be your heir." He brought him outside and said, "Look toward heaven and count the stars, if you're able to count them." Then he said to him, "So shall your descendants be." And he believed the Lord, and the Lord reckoned it to him as righteousness. Fun little comment that gets picked up by Christians for sure, right? reckoned to him as righteousness. Here again in chapter 21, 22, around Isaac, in contrast to his, as people are taught to think of, his lack of faith, which I don't think it's his lack of faith. I think he's just, anyway, he's just being a scared man when he pimps out. I'm not justifying him pimping her out. I just think it's not about his faith. Okay. Then he said to him, I am the Lord who brought you from Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess. But he said, oh, Lord God, how am I to know that I shall possess it? Right? This need for land, need to be able to establish yourselves is important. And it rings throughout this narratives, many of these narratives, right? So God said to him, bring me a heifer 3 years old, a female goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. He brought him all these and cut them in two, laying each half over against the other. But he did not cut the birds in two, too small. And when the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. Are you all picturing this in your head? This is a lot of meat laid out, right? A heifer, a 3-year-old cow, a 3-year-old goat, right? A ram 3 years old, right? This is a lot of meat. Okay. As the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and a deep and terrifying darkness descended upon him. It's getting scary up in here, right? Then the Lord said to Abram, know this for certain, that your offspring shall be aliens in a land that is not theirs, and shall be slaves there. That's great. And they shall be oppressed for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve or are enslaved to, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. As for yourself, you shall go to your ancestors in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age. And they shall come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. I've never looked up what that's all about. Didn't occur to me to do that today either. I don't know about you, but I think God could, this is not a great thing to tell your dude that you're know that your descendants are going to be enslaved. I love it because I do, and understandably, I have students every term who come in and talk about God as all powerful, all knowing, all this and that, and loving. I'm like, yeah, then why did God just announce to Abram that all these people are going to be enslaved instead of stopping it from happening? The same, kind of the resonant question. Why did God watch all these things happen? Well, partly because you've got your concept of God is not sustainable. Anyway, also interesting to say that 4 generations is 400 years. That's not realistic, right? So is that a metaphor? Is that a reference to something else? Perhaps, right? So when the sun had gone down and it was dark, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between these pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants, I give this land. So pay attention to what's described. I do have a map I'm going to share next. From the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. So we're going to come back over here. We're going to look at a map of what was just described, which is primarily the region of the Fertile Crescent. So we have to presume something. I don't think you can see my cursor, can you? We have to presume that he's in, kind of in the general region of where the word Palestine is on this map, right? And the river in Egypt is the Nile, right? And I'm gonna see if I can do something here to oh, that's not what I wanted. Oh, dear. So the Nile, you all can see where it is on this map, right? Lower Egypt, the Nile, all the way over to the Euphrates. I mean, the swath of land that is described as what he's going to give to Abram's descendants is so much bigger than than what is being argued over, first of all. Um, so much bigger than what, you know, when they the story is just relegated to the region of Palestine, you know? So, I don't know why, I think it makes me giggle or something at in some level that there are these moments in the story, in the narrative that go grand, right? They have some grand visions or desires, right? Like, let's go big. Let's take the whole territory. Uh, when in terms of numbers, they are not big enough, to take over all of that. Let's see, there was another map. Well, it's fine. What I just showed you was good enough. Okay, am I missing anything in the chat? Maybe I wanna eat. Okay, let's keep going. I'm gonna keep going with a story. See, there's more to talk about here. Okay. So so all of these people living in already known to be living in this part of the world, and God is saying, "I'm going to give it to you," even though all of these people are already living there, right? So, um I've tried to do, conversations about what's happening over what has turned into a genocide in Gaza. I've tried to talk about it as a biblical scholar in terms of there are biblical ideas that are being held onto here to justify all these things, and so I'm simultaneously just I'm just undone by everything that's happening, and it just feels trivial to point it out, but it feels like I need to point it out, that it's these stories, these promises are in there from the very, very, very beginning, that this land that you're standing on, I'm gonna give to you and your descendants. Never mind that this is not a clear lineage that we can look at, right? Never mind that there were people already living there. Never mind that Abram's own descendants are his own, his lineage is blended with the people all around him. Like, never mind that they live in Egypt, so they're going to intermarry. Like, just all of it. Like, it's fantasy, you know? It's a story for people who are unsettled. But people have treated it like it is actually something that God said for the last 3,000 years. And getting people to see that, getting people to see that those promises were the fantasy of a bunch of tribal men, ancient tribal men who needed this kind of reassurance. Getting people to see that about their own scriptures, Jewish or Christian, is really hard. And so there's a lot built upon this mishandling of these promises, this narrative. There's a lot riding on it. You don't it's not just the establishment of the state of Israel after World War II. It's not just that, although that is a significant piece in the last 100 and some years, last 80 years. So I will continue to point it out, even though it feels like a finger in a dam, finger in a what am I trying to say? There's a dam that's about to burst. The dam has already burst, and I'm trying to stop it with a finger. I don't know. Um, yeah, this is where I'm thinking, right? Abram did a lot of traveling to Syria, Canaan, to Egypt, back to Canaan to finally decide on what he decided on what God called it the promise. I mean, yeah, and also, you know, it we're dealing with the narrative right now, right? And I think that's a really important thing to point out, right? Also, like, um, more but also the parallel, which is what happened here? Where did these people actually come from? They came from this land, just like their neighbors. Like, they lived among the people. They were here, right? They're creating a false sense of separateness over and against the other people living there. Like, they're creating a superiority element, but they're just like the other people living in the territory, right? So acting as if they're coming in from outside is the first um is the first, not curveball, but the first, like, that isn't legitimate. That isn't true to how it went down, right? The people that became the Israelite people were living in the land, and their ancestors had migrated to that region, from all over the place, right? All over the world, that Asia and Africa, and maybe even Europe, but mostly Asia and Africa. And so it is a fantasy. It's a narrative about superiority. It's a narrative about um, being the favored ones. All things that make me very uncomfortable to say. Being the chosen ones, like that. Nah, 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 nah. Uh, okay, I'm just gonna go back to reading. Let's do. How do we do this? Then okay. Now, the birth of Ishmael. I was hoping I'd get farther than chapter 17, but maybe we'll just do 16 and 17. Okay, the birth of Ishmael. So, in the last chapter, Abram was mad at God for not giving him a child, right? Now, Sarai, Abram's woman, not wife, but woman, bore him no children. She had an Egyptian slave whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, "You see that the Lord has prevented me from bearing children." This is how they understand it, right? "Go into my slave. It may be that I shall obtain children by her." And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. I have so many students who get stuck on this part and they don't realize the system that all of these people were a part of, right? That Sarai is, as a female, only matters for her body, right? I mean, we saw that in chapter 12. She isn't even given a name throughout the whole story where she's being bartered, right? Hagar is also a woman, but is also enslaved. So a deeper level of ownership and lack of autonomy over herself, right? So yeah, we have all kinds of things happening that are really unpleasant. And do women throughout history play into patriarchy, play into their own oppression? Yes, they do. Yes, we have. We have done that. That is a thing that happens, partly for survival, partly yeah, for survival, right? Or partly at times because we don't know any better, right? It just depends, right? But so when people say, "Well, she told him to do it and Abram listened, but it was her idea." I'm like, you got to stop that. You got to stop that, because why was it her idea? Where is that idea coming from? Why does she need to do that? She is only useful in terms of her body and what she's producing for him, right? And you saw how upsetting it was in the last chapter for Abram that the enslaved peoples are reproducing under his house, but he's not, right? That was very upsetting for him. So there are all kinds of things, all kinds of ways we can look at this struggle that women have around the issue of childbearing, which is what I pointed out in chapter 3 of Genesis. The struggle, the suffering around childbearing is not just about pushing out of a small hole a head, right, and body, but also all of the social, cultural stressors that are placed on women around reproduction. Okay. Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. So, after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarai, Abram's woman, took Hagar the Egyptian, her slave, and gave her to her man, Abram, as a woman. This is also very much misunderstood, and it's fascinating to me because it could not be more clear. She gave a woman to Abram, and that woman was given to him as a wife. We're going to use the language that's being used as a wife, meaning she's to be had sex with. Like, that's it. Like, it doesn't get more clear that marriage, I'm using air quotes, marriage in the Hebrew Bible is about a man having sex with a woman. It's just right there. It's there in chapter 12, right? When Sarai is handed over to the Pharaoh as his wife. Like, she's to have sex with. That's what it means. It's what it means in the Hebrew Bible. So yeah, he went into Hagar. He went into Hagar. Hi. Hello. Come join us. And she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. You can't blame her, right? This is what they were aiming for, to use her body, right? And she was angry about that. Can't blame her. And Sarai said to Abram, "May the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my slave to your embrace, and when she saw she conceived, she looked on me with contempt. How dare she not understand this system that we're all in? May the Lord judge between you and me, right? I am less in the wrong here than you are, Mr. Penis holding person. Hey, do you want to come join us? Come here. Come here. Hey, you're just going to make a lot of noise, aren't you? Hi. I know, precious. No, okay. But Abram said to Sarai, "Your slave is in your power. Do to her as you please." Then Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she ran away from her. Hi, come here. Okay, I wish you would come up here because I just want everybody to see you. So many things to talk about with this, right? The parallels to more recent examples of slavery, enslavement, and even on this continent, right? That the women in the household are also property, but just not at the same level as the enslaved peoples, and bodies being used, and the males, patriarchs, using all the women's bodies. Right, they're all there available to him. Just fascinating to me, right, that these human realities have continued. Hi, I just think you're adorable. Yeah. But she won't let me pick her up to show you her because she associates me picking her up with giving her medicine, which you can't blame her because I do. I have to every day. Yeah. All these stories are difficult, right? Your slave, this person is in your power, right? Do to her as you please. Just devastating. So she dealt harshly because of all the tension and jealousy and the crap that patriarchal systems force women, non-male people to, the things they're forced into doing and the ways they're expected to survive and things they're forced to do because of all that. So anyway, I just think all that needs to be said every time you read these stories, this story in particular. So the angel of the Lord found her, Hagar, by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, the angels did, "Hagar, enslaved woman of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going?" She said, "I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai." The angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress." It just, return to that awful situation, right? This is the angel of the Lord telling an enslaved person who's seeking their own freedom to get back into that shithole. Go back into it. I mean, that's just gross, right? And on a certain level, the writers of this narrative did not see anything wrong with that, right? The angel of the Lord also said, I will so greatly multiply your offspring that they cannot be counted for multitude. As if, this is reassurance, right? It's okay to go back because I'm going to make you a great nation too. And the angel of the Lord said to her, and this is some sort of poetic form, right? So we're supposed to take this as something that already, this is a story, a song, a poem, or whatever that existed out there that was woven into this story. Now you have conceived and shall bear a son. You shall call him Ishmael. What does the footnote say? Oh, right. Yeah. God hears. For the Lord has given heed to your affliction. He shall be a wild ass of a man with his hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him. And he shall live at odds with all his kin. Again, God's not doing a great job on the, pronouncing promises. He tells Abram, your descendants are going to be enslaved for 400 years. And now telling Hagar that her son and his people will be at odds with everyone. It's not good. So she named the Lord who spoke to her, you are El Roy, which is God who sees. For she said, have I really seen God and remained alive after seeing him? Therefore, the well was called Bir Lahai Roy. It lies between Kadesh and Bered. It's interesting too to have a woman. Many people have noted, right? Hagar is the first person to actually encounter the Lord, right? First person in this narrative. And she knows enough to know that it's surprising she didn't die from the exposure. It's just very interesting little tidbits here. But anyway, Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram named his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael for him. I'm going to see how we're doing here. Let's go to Genesis 17. This is another odd chapter. Yes, that is true, right? This is the tradition. This is the set of descendants through which Muslims trace their heritage back to Abraham. Absolutely. Yes. And you do see that the Ishmaelites being talked about in the biblical text, the biblical storyline, right? I love that. Right? I mean, it's painful, right? We literally, like, these people are established on the backs of other people. It's not funny. I'm laughing because there's so much that's scary and terrifying these days. I just have to laugh. Yes, that is precisely my point there, Hive Indicator. Yep. Not a good argument for returning. Yep. Okay. All these things, all good things. So let's see. 4 o'clock. I have time. I'm going to keep going. For those of you who are able to hang in there, that's great. And I understand that some of you just can't, but it's so fun to have you here. Partly because I've read these promises in chapters 13 and 15 about the land, and chapter 15 about that really interesting cutting of the covenant that took place, cutting the animals, the fire passing through them. Excuse me. I want to keep going and have this in it as well. So the sign of the covenant. I do find that the language is just so fascinating, right? To the trimming of the end of trimming off the foreskin is a sign. I mean, it's just interesting. It's propaganda, right? Call this the sign of the covenant. Mutilating the flesh, cutting off extra flesh. Lots of different ways that people look at this. Doing something permanent to someone else's body. without their ability to consent to that. It's kind of interesting. And it's all about men and their penises. It just all comes back to that. So let's go ahead and read through this. When Abram was 99 years old, so we've got 13 years later, right? According to the narrative, the Lord appeared to Abram and said, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless. I have to comment. We just lost 13 years. Like we just skipped over 13 years. What's happening with Abram and his people, in these 13 years that God has to come in and say, hey, remember me? El Shaddai, yeah. Anyway, walk before me and be blameless. And I will make my covenant between me and you and will make you exceedingly numerous. Okay, you made that promise already 2 other times. You made the promise and we haven't been granted that land that you promised. Right? So the covenant gets re-upped, right? It gets reviewed, renewed, and it has things added to it, right? So initially it was just, hey, I'm going to make you a blessing to the nations and like give you all this land. And then second time, we're going to take some animals' lives as a point of fact that this is an important thing that I'm doing. And now that's not good enough, right? We're going to do something new. Okay? You do these things and I will be good to you. A biblical theme that plays throughout the Hebrew Bible, be good to, follow God and things will go well. This biblical theme in and of itself sets people up for tragedy to also be a crisis of faith. It's really sad that the foundations of this tradition are just bad theology through and through. Like if you're going to have a God, at least let it be a God that understands that life is full of suffering. And it's not always going to go your way. Like stop promising all this great stuff, Anyway, okay. Walk before me, be blameless. I will make my covenant and I will make the covenant, right? So we're not even asking Abram to do something in response. It's just, I'm going to make this covenant and I will make you exceedingly numerous. Then Abram fell on his face and God said to him, as for me, so God is saying, this is my part. This is my covenant with you. You shall be the ancestor of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, adding people into the name. For I have made you the ancestor of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant to be God to you and to your offspring after you. And I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land where you are now an alien, all the land of Canaan, for a perpetual holding, and I will be their God. Please do not underestimate the power of these claims, okay? To this day. God said to Abraham, as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you, throughout their generations. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. It's between him and Abram and Abram's offspring after him. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. Throughout your generations, every male among you shall be circumcised when he is 8 days old, including the slave born in your house and the one bought with your money from any foreigner who is not of your offspring. Both the slave born in your house and the one bought with your money must be circumcised. All of the humans that you purchased and all of their descendants. Yes, slavery. The Bible's anti-slavery. Bullshit. So shall my covenant be in your flesh, an everlasting covenant. Any uncircumcised in the flesh of his foreskin shall be cut off from his people, pun intended. He has broken my covenant. This is an important place to pause and say, when we look at the Newer Testament several hundred years later, and you see Paul going to the Gentiles, going to the nations, and starting this thing that's meant to be considered a part of Judaism. And he's saying, but you don't have to be circumcised because you get into the covenant a different way. And that works well to get numbers in. And then someone from Judaism who's really still devout about all of that gets worked up over this claim that Paul is saying you can be a Jew, you can be a part of Judaism without circumcision. They have a reason to be upset about that, right? I'm not, I'm right. Just like traditionally speaking, textually speaking, the promises that they've believed, the promises they've been reared on, however you want to look at all of this, according to their tradition, they were in the right. Like what Paul ends up doing, saying you don't actually have to adhere to the law, you don't have to keep the covenant. It's actually a new covenant going on over here. But it's still Judaism, right? Like that's pretty sketchy. And that's really bold and narcissistic, right? So I think it's, as much as I love to laugh about how phallic all of this is, right? How many things revolve around men's penises. I think it's worth noting, right? They're taking their scriptures seriously when they say you can't be a part of this group if you haven't had this done. Like it's just not done, right? Even if I don't. And the play on words. I mean, it's just really obvious, isn't it? I don't know. Okay, anyway. So this is what God has said over and over and over and over and over and over and over in these 14 verses, right? All right, I'm establishing your covenant. Here's my deal. I got you, and you're gonna cut off the foreskins, right? And that's how we'll know. And God said to Abraham, as for Sarai, your woman, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. I will bless her, and also give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall give rise to nations. Kings of peoples shall come from her. Then Abram fell on his face and laughed and said to himself, can a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Can Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? I do find this really funny because, yes, a man who's 100 years old can produce, can contribute to that effort. If only they couldn't, if only men stopped being fertile at around the time that women stopped being fertile. Like, wouldn't that be nice? I understand evolutionarily speaking, biologist chimed in one time when I commented about this on Facebook. He's like, well, creating eggs is a lot more energy than sperm. I'm like, I get it, but like, if only men could stop being fertile at some point in their lives, this place would be a better world. Anyway, okay. Also, I did get to be a part of Kip Davis's celebration of hitting 20,000 subscribers, and the guy who runs Esoterica was there, and he was talking about how when we seek this thing, Melech is the word here in the Hebrew for that we translate king, and what did he call it? A tribal warlord is what we should really be thinking of. That was actually kind of fun, right? Because we're just talking much smaller groups of people. We're not thinking kings like King George. We're thinking small people who have a guy that they all turn to, grandpa, right? Anyway, I just had to comment on that. Okay. How can a child be born to a man? Yes. Yes. A man at 100 can father a child, can sire a child. Okay. Can Sarah, who's 90 years old, bear a child? No. No, that's not possible. Okay. Just to be clear. And Abram said to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live in your sight." God said, "No. No. But your woman Sarah shall bear you a son, and you shall name him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will bless him and make him fruitful and exceedingly numerous. He shall be the father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this season next year." Yeah. And when he had finished talking with him, God went up from Abram. Then Abraham took his son Ishmael and all the slaves born in his house or bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and he circumcised the flesh of their foreskins that very day. That was a long day. That was we heard how many hundreds there were few years ago, a decade ago. Goodness, this was a long day. As God had said to him. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. Like, why do we have to reiterate this? poor man in the days before ice, and numbing agents. And his son Ishmael was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. I'm glad we clarified that. That very day, Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised, and all the men of his house, in case you missed it, 2 verses before, slaves born in the house and those bought with money from a foreigner were circumcised with him. So make no mistake about it. The men in this house have been removed from their foreskin. Okay. I'm going to stop here because I'm getting tired. And okay. Wait. Oh dear. I always get concerned when someone says something semi-critical. Let's see. Men just tend to be more entitled, I believe, in general, and therefore do more horrible things. Oh, is that what you're saying, Smitty? You're not a fan of that kind of generalization? Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think I missed the whole exchange here. But so who wrote these stories again? Yeah, it's a good question, right? Who's writing these stories? Men write them for men's benefits. They're by men for men, right? And where did they first make their appearance in the modern day for the first time? Sunset time. I mean, I'm not sure we can answer that question, although it's an interesting question. But we can talk about in general, right? There's a tradition that existed at the time in the first century, and as a Newer Testament scholar, I think about biblical text through this lens of this First Testament being a set on its own, and the Second Testament being set in motion because of some ideas that Paul had, which are worth deliberating over. And yeah. Thank you. Considering anew. I'm so glad you're here today. Yeah, good. I appreciate knowing that it's still helpful. Sometimes I'm not sure if people who are here are like, yeah, I've worked all this out. So I'm glad. I mean, to talk through some of this stuff that, not helpful. Okay. So yes, thank you all for being here. I'm just delightful. I'm delighted that there's people here chatting and all the things that you're doing to be here to support me, telling your friends about some of the videos I do, or subscribing to my channel, all the things, and the people who support me through Patreon and through the memberships in my channel here on YouTube. I'm grateful to you all for all of those things. And when you do anything along those lines, you do help other people find this work, other people who might find it interesting. So letting you know that, chatting, subscribing, liking, comments, all the liking videos, commenting on videos, all that helps. So I appreciate that. And we've got an interesting exchange happening, and I appreciate that. I'm gonna wrap it up here, and I will be here next week. Yes, I will be here next week. Okay, see you soon.